Hello everybody, you're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host Dane Cobain. This is the weekly radio show where we chat about the local arts news. We have a different guest on each week. We head over to the Rhylight Zone for a short story and or some poetry. We catch up with Twangling Jack Ford over in the Ilk Shed for a weekly album review, and we play local, unsigned and or independent music. As always, you can reach out to me here at the studio by dropping me an email on dane.cobain@wickhamsound.org.uk. That's dane.cobain@wickhamsound.org.uk. I'm particularly keen to hear from poets, performers, musicians, people with MP3s, people with stories to share local arts news. Don't hesitate to get in touch. We're also repeated Monday nights on Wickham Sound. We're on the Wickham Sound Listen Again. We're on iTunes, Spotify, and wherever else you get your podcasts. A little bit of admin news. So the team at Wickham Wanderers have recently joined us at Wickham Sound. So that means if there's a football match on Tuesday night, we hand over to Wickham Wanderers, and the art show is on Wednesday night instead. If you keep an eye on our Facebook page, you won't miss a show. You can also obviously just listen again if you miss a show. It is time for us to head over to the Rhylight Zone for this week's entry to that, and we're going to continue with the serialization of Formerly, The Rise and Fall of a Social Network, which is a novel by myself, Dane Cobain. Full thing's available on, Amazon and all of that stuff. If you miss an episode, check it out on Catch Up. Yeah, latest part of Formerly.
Chapter 4. It was 2 weeks later, and London was covered by a blanket of fine mist that seemed to soak through clothes, skin and bones. It was horrible. On days like those, I found it hard to get out of bed until the pathetic plug-in heater kicked in and warmed the room up. I woke with a sense of deep, dark foreboding. My workload had grown exponentially, and I'd already stayed late 3 times that week, once until 11 p.m. My fears turned out to be grounded. John had rolled back a bunch of fixes, so I effectively had to finish 3 days of work in one. The guys went to the pub at lunchtime, but I stayed behind and powered through, though I did share a bottle of wine with Flick, who was also staying in the office. The lead singer of an obscure K-pop band collapsed and died on stage the night before, launching his profile amidst a wave of publicity. Tributes from his fans and fellow musicians soon started pouring in, and for 24 hours or so we were the hottest site on the internet. It was just the sort of story that went down well with the media. In our case, she told me, there really is no such thing as bad publicity. Death always puts a negative spin on an article. We have to accept that and move on. Besides, journalists love death. Nothing sells papers like a tragedy. The Sun has already agreed to run with it. Yeah? Whose soul did you sell to place that? No one's, she laughed. I just spent the morning on Twitter and waited for nature to take its course. Nowadays, anyone has a shot at greatness as long as they have a Twitter account and a story to tell. And you have both. Of course, she replied. Most people do. They just don't always realise it. Her phone rang out from the table and she excused herself to answer it. By the time that she put the phone down, I was deep in John's messy source code. We both worked on in silence until the rest of the team made their inebriated return. I didn't get home until 1:45 in the morning. It was a long day, and I had more amends to make over the weekend. My schedule was further complicated by the fact that the chunk of code I was working on was so messed up that it was easier for me to track down the original diagram and to recode the whole thing from scratch. Who knew a search bar could cause such problems? When I got home, Sarah was sitting cross-legged on the sofa with a glass of wine in one hand and the TV remote in the other. She hit the mute button as I walked in and then unexpectedly called me. "How dare you just stroll in as though nothing is wrong?" she demanded. "They're working you too hard. Can't you see that? They're going to drive you into the ground, and I'm going to have to sit here and watch them do it." "I'm sorry," I replied, a little annoyed because I hadn't done anything wrong. Did she think that I wanted to work late on a Friday, surrounded by the funk of fully grown men who rarely showered? "It's my own fault. I spent the day fixing some mistakes that I made." "Yeah? And what did you spend the night doing, huh? You've been gone for nearly 18 hours. Have you been working the whole time?" "For most of it," I replied, sheepishly avoiding her gaze. "We ordered a pizza and so we stopped for a while to eat it. Apart from that, we worked throughout the day. Flick and I even stayed through lunch while the rest of the team was at the pub." "Dan," she snapped, "this is like your fling with Anna all over again." "That was years ago. Besides, we were on a break." "Yeah? Well, let's hope you're ready for another one. I'm not sharing you with anyone, Dan. Don't you think it's strange that you spend more time in her company than in mine?" "Not really," I replied. "We work together. I'd say that's pretty normal." "You know what I mean. You're spending 12 hours a day at the office, and by the time you get home, you're ready to go to bed. What does that say about our relationship? What does that say about you?" "It will get better," I promised. And it'll be worth it. Besides, you can talk. What about all the times you jetted off to France for Le Web or to the States for Disrupt? You just left me here with no money, no food, and a mountain of work to get through. All this didn't matter then, did it? And what about when I took the job? You knew what I was getting into, and you said you were cool with it. What happened to being cool? How dare you, she scowled. There's a difference between being supportive and being a doormat. Besides, maybe I was wrong. At first I thought it would be good for us, but it's not. It's not good at all. I'm unhappy, Dan, and I have been since you took the job. Is this really what you want? 'Cause you're on thin ice, Dan. You got some thinking to do. You can sleep on the sofa tonight. When I returned to the office on Monday, I was surprised to see Peter wearing a pair of chinos, a Washington State University hoodie, and a DKNY baseball cap. He was in the kitchen, brewing a pot of coffee. I guess the founders had more pressing concerns than fashion, but there was such a thing as common sense. He looked like he'd been involved in an explosion at a laundrette. Dan, he said, good to see you, buddy. How are you settling in? It's already a second home, I replied. What brings you here? I just got back from Palo Alto. I've been sweet-talking a few old contacts to see what I can get out of them. Servers, space, support. A bit of money would be nice too. Abby said we keep the servers in the loft, I said. Is that true? Abby said that. Well, he told you the truth, although he should have kept his mouth shut. Why'd you keep the servers in the loft? I asked. John and I like to be in control, Peter said carefully. We want the servers to be somewhere that no one else has access to. There are some evil people in this world, Dan. You've got to be on your guard at all times. But the loft? I mean, really? What about the cloud? Why bother with your own set of servers when you could use a third-party provider? It's the best place for them, Peter said. There's always someone here, and John and I are the only people with access. We've got a good enough connection, good enough for now at least. If we can avoid sharing data with a third party, then we'll do so. Why hire space on someone else's servers when you could build your own? Besides, we've got the best sysadmin in the city. Who's that then? Me, he replied, swelling with pride and self-satisfaction. I let it go at that. Like John, Peter preferred to work alone to avoid the inevitable distractions caused by sitting in a room with Flick and Kerry for hours on end. While John worked from the bedroom, Peter sat amongst the servers in the loft and left the rest of us to fight it out for space in the living room. We were tapping heavily away at our keyboards when Flick came off the phone, placed her mobile on the desk beside her and began to laugh. I did it, she giggled. I finally did it. She laughed again, looked back at her screen and then sighed. Gentlemen, I hope you're ready for this, because traffic's about to go through the roof. Why? I asked her. What did you do? Oh, just my little stroke of genius. Paid placements. It's the way forward. You mean like adverts? No, she replied. I mean like taking advantage of idiots on Facebook. I've just been talking to a guy in the Philippines who runs a Christian Facebook page so he can sell ad space. For a couple of £100, he'll include our link in the description of his next post. Yeah? Kerry said. And what kind of stuff does he post? You know, the usual. Bible quotes, 1 like equals 1 prayer, that sort of shit. I know the type, Kerry told her vaguely. You get a lot of those back home in the States. But I never knew there was money in it. How many followers does he have? 800,000, give or take a couple of hundred, Flick said. His last link got 375,000 clicks in 2 days. Nice, I replied. That's a decent chunk of traffic. Shame it's not really relevant. Not really relevant? Flick laughed. Plugging formally to religious zealots is as relevant as you can get. We need to reach a large crowd of gullible people who believe anything we tell them. Where better to look than organised religion? Besides, they love life after death, and that's what our site is all about. Touché, I replied. And when's the placement going live? Flick refreshed her Facebook feed and scowled. Any second now, she said. I'd better go and warn Peter. Let's hope the servers are up to scratch. The post went live later that afternoon, and the servers were immediately hit by a surge of traffic that threatened to take us offline. Peter's happy mood rapidly deteriorated as the dilapidated infrastructure started to crumble. I had to draft Flick in to help me to prioritise the bug reports that were slowly trickling in. John, meanwhile, was sent out with a company credit card to buy some new equipment to prop the system up. Traffic peaked about an hour after the first link went out and then calmed down and built back up to a second, higher peak 6 hours later. Flick said that the post was getting a second wind as people shared the original shares. Either way, we weren't complaining. We were signing up a dozen new members a minute, a higher registration rate than ever before. Forget about the servers, Peter said, when the team sat down for a celebratory cup of coffee after the initial onslaught was over. What about the database? To tell the truth, I had worries of my own. It was like running a Super Bowl advert for a local diner. People were coming in from all over the world, and we struggled to meet the demand. In the first 6 hours, we received reports of a half-dozen major security flaws, as well as more than 100 minor glitches that we hadn't picked up on before. One guy from Singapore was only a couple of steps away from getting into the back end, which is never good. Of course, I got home later than I wanted to, and I got the feeling that Sarah wasn't happy. The flat was mysteriously empty, and when I tried to call her, it went straight to voicemail. I left a message at the tone. Hey babe, it's me. I'm guessing you're mad at me again, huh? Well, whatever, I'm home now. I guess I'll see you in the morning.
Okay, that was the latest instalment of Formerly the Rise and Fall of a Social Network by myself, Dane Cobain. You're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM at Wickham Sound, and it is time for a little bit of music. So we're going to play Fabulous Parfait with Je rentre à pied, which means I return on foot.
Uber à 19h, tu me prends en bas de chez moi. Tu donnes le nom de la boîte, ta CV va transpirer. Au bar à 22h, toujours pas prêt à danser. Encore un peu trop froid, t'es qu'à ta 3e vodka. Lâche-toi, oublie tes inhibitions. Lâche-toi avant de toucher le fond. T'as pas payé à l'entrée pour voir les autres s'enlacer. Quand tu m'as invité, j'espérais bien t'embrasser. Et puis je me suis maquillée exprès pour t'émoustiller. Mais vu ce que t'as consommé, tu risques pas de remarquer. Lâche-toi, j'ai envie de m'amuser. Lâche-toi, je suis venue pour danser. Oui, j'aime la tequila, mais j'en veux pas, me force pas. Non, franchement, non, merci, ça va. Si j'attaque Malibu, je mâcherai la tête dans le cul. Trop tard le bip. Et puis, je suis pas venue pour venir bourrer dans la rue. Les nez ont des urgences, gâche mon teint d'ingénu. Lâche-moi, je suis venue pour oublier. Lâche-moi, tu commences à me saouler. Lâche-toi, oublie tes inhibitions. Lâche-toi avant de toucher le fond. T'as pas besoin de ça pour être heureux dans ta vie. C'est un cercle vicieux, t'en auras jamais fini. La musique de Kéké craint autant que le DJ. Je suis prête à rentrer. Tu pourrais me raccompagner? Et c'est là que GG se met à se déhancher. Sauf que moi ton état, il est à ma volupté. Lâche-moi, tu es vraiment trop bourré. Wow. Lâche-moi, j'appelle la sécurité. Lâche-moi, plus question de t'embrasser. Lâche-moi, je préfère rentrer
That was Without You by Off Party, and before that we had Fabulous Parfait with the Girontra PA. You're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host, Dane Cobain. And this week we are doing a Twangling Jack Ford album review special, so we're going to hand over to Twangling Jack for a few album reviews.
Aida, Giuseppe Verdi. Soldiers march to grand processional themes. People declare their undying love to big melodies with great swells of strings. People worship the gods to rippling harps and big choirs. Every scene climaxes several times. Aida is never less than spectacular. Love rivals argue with massive musical and theatrical gestures. Impossible passions are expressed with impossibly high notes. Where obsessive love is the cruelest master that always leads its acolytes to certain death. And there is that riff. That march I have even heard football supporters aggressively chanting during a scary carriage invasion on the tube. One of opera's greatest hits, the catchiest of trumpet fanfares. I recently watched a production on Sydney Harbour which you can find on Sky Arts. Costumes and dancing like an Olympic opening ceremony choreographed by Craig Revel Horwood. Guards in PVC with machine guns, and they even had real camels and fireworks. Aida may be the least subtle work of art ever to have been staged, especially as not much actually happens. Two women fighting over a man who chooses to die rather than live with one of them, while the other woman chooses to die with the man rather than live alone. All this is set to a backdrop of two countries fighting a war that involves the main characters. As is common in opera, Every thought and everything sung is an explosion of adjectives, repeated and repeated. I am not sure the subtitles help. They are probably an unnecessary distraction. The music, the passion of the singing, and the spectacular are entertainment enough. On those occasions that the main singers are not singing the big tunes are played by the orchestra and chorus, and the main singing characters weave in and out and across them, making the whole thing a satisfying listen, without any knowledge of Italian. There is little of that rambling, tuneless recitative that puts so many off opera. Aida, Verdi. Arcade Fire, Funeral. The template for indie rock probably goes right back to Buddy Holly and the original Crickets, with lead guitar, rhythm guitar, bass and drums. A format used by the Merseybeat groups, the Velvet Underground, Punk and Americana. Arcade Fire are often cited as being an indie band, but they have other instruments to add to the mix, strings and keyboards and chimey percussion, all of which allow the songs to build. The singer has that high angsty indie sore throat sound, and the guitars are scratchy and only slightly distorted, doing that thing of playing on the hi-hat beat like Coldplay and Snow Patrol, a style I was yet to get thoroughly sick of back when this album first came out. There were 5 singles taken off the album, and the highest charting was Rebellion, which has a U2 type simplicity in its structure. The pounding away on 2 chords and the relief when there is a brief change create a tension and relief, while the counter melodies and string parts come and go, elaborating mournful lyrics, typical of the album being both sad and joyous. Most of the songs have strong melodies, especially Wake Up, which is their Hey Jude moment. It was a clever move to get that out of the way on the first album, since it took the Beatles 8 years to come up with it. It has a wordless sung melody that must have been the hands in the air moment at every Arcade Fire concert. It has a stronger guitar sound, not quite the distortion of a heavy rock Marshall stack, but more like they cranked up the AC-30. Then, before you can tire of the grandiose operatic nature of it, it nimbly about turns into a Town Called Malice Can't Hurry Love Motown beat, with sung lyrics that mirror the original chanting. On the last song, the singer lets his wife sing and it all goes a bit Bjork. The singer's wife is a vital part of their live act, playing many instruments and being very much a focus of attention. But her song is a bit of a disappointing end to what might otherwise be a perfect album. Arcade Fire, Funeral. Billy Bragg, Must I Paint You a Picture? The essential Billy Bragg. Like John Cooper Clarke, Billy Bragg was the go-to support act in the late 70s. With just an electric guitar, he was on and off stage with the minimum of fuss. I know I saw him supporting the Style Council, but I probably saw him on other occasions as well. He appeared on the scene with a mixture of pop songs and protest. He was on board with all the right-on protest movements like Rock Against Racism and Red Wedge. He wrote light poppy songs like New England, which was a hit for Kirsty MacColl, and he had success with protest songs like Between the Wars. He was like a Cockney punk electric Dylan. Mostly his sound was quite sparse, with him singing in a pronounced London accent. He played solo electric guitar, which was quite distorted, but far more elaborate than the punk guitar of the time. Listening to the early songs now with their sparse production, it is tempting to think how much better they would have been with a band, but they might not have had the same impact. His strength was in his lyrics. He poetically celebrated the realities of life and romance. His love songs were council estate kitchen sink dramas, where you might wish on shooting stars only to find they were satellites. The lyrics often went beyond being witty to being laugh out loud funny, like the line, "How can you lie back and think of England when you don't even know who's in the team?" Then he made a commercial jangly pop album with a band made up of some of the best and best known musicians of the era, and had a big hit with the song Sexuality, a song very much for the AIDS era but with a message that is still relevant today. He was given permission to write music to accompany lyrics written by Woody Guthrie, which he performed with the band Wilco. and some of these are also on this album. But listening to this album again in 2022, there is a line that stood out for me from one of his amusing electric pop songs released in 1991. As a warning to the future, you're a dedicated swallower of fascism. You're an accident waiting to happen. Must I paint you a picture? The essential Billy Bragg. Lou Reed, Berlin. I bought a Lou Reed box set with no expectation that I would like this album, but I've played it more than any of the other discs. Lou Reed made a very successful album produced by David Bowie and Mick Ronson, which was full of radio-friendly songs with sexual and drug references that mysteriously got past the censors. Walk on the Wild Side was a massive success, telling tales of a whole cast of characters. He followed this success by making an album that just followed two characters over 10 songs. It tells the tale of Caroline and Jim in what has been called a movie for the ears. If that is the case, it is a very dark film noir kitchen sink art house movie, but it has some great songs, many of which became part of his stage act, even though it was not until the 2000s that he performed the whole piece. The music is much more varied than you would expect from a rock record of the time, making it sound more like a stage show. The songs have Lou Reed's trademark simple riffing guitar with his poetic New York sneered lyrics. It has been said that Lou Reed is the opposite of auto-tune, and possibly one reason why the pop audience did not get it is that the vocal is very high in the mix, so you can hear every gruesome word. It details drug misuse and violence, and was almost certainly written from personal experience. In the song Caroline says as she gets up from the floor, "You can hit me all you want, but I don't love you anymore." There is a harrowing song that describes how they took her kids away, listing all their reasons to the sound of children crying. It concludes with Jim looking at the bed in which Caroline had committed suicide by slitting her wrists. And he muses that, "I'm going to stop wasting my time. Somebody else would have broken both her arms." Berlin was not well received at the time, which is why I had no expectations of it, but it is now considered a classic. It was not the last time Reed would find success and then follow it up with something that was never going to match it. The world wanted another bright, shiny glam rock party album, but got Berlin by Lou Reed. Mahavishnu Orchestra, Birds of Fire. I recently did a piece on Snarky Puppy, which received the most hits of any of my album recommendation postings on my YouTube page. Because of that, I thought I should delve deeper into the 1970s jazz fusion that Snarky Puppy reminded me of. The problem was that apart from the radio hits of the time like Stanley Clarke's School Days and Weather Report's Birdland, nothing else really made much of an impression on me. Acts like Return to Forever, though excellent virtuoso players, seemed to be taking the more challenging and innovative musical direction taken by their mentor Miles Davis into more commercial areas. I found it less rocky than Steely Dan, less funky than James Brown, and with less swing than Count Basie or Duke Ellington. I think I was hoping for the lightning-fast unison riffing of bebop and the abrasive, moody Fender Rhodes piano chord work that Chick Corea and Herbie Hancock brought to Miles's music when he went electric, but what I got was dated synth sounds and music that felt somehow laid back despite being blisteringly fast. However, I've now come to appreciate and enjoy the music of the Mahavishnu Orchestra, a band put together by another one of Miles Davis's acolytes from the Bitches Brew era, the guitarist John McLaughlin. As pre-punk schoolboys, my friends and I judged each other's favourite acts by the prowess of the musicians, like ranking athletes or footballers. The boy that brought in the Mahavishnu Orchestra to pass around must surely have been declared the winner. The playing is fast, intricate riffs played simultaneously by guitar, keys and violin, like bebop riffs for hippies. At one point a bit of country creeps in, but is blown off down the plain by a tornado of savage blistering notes. It is not pleasant in the background at a dinner party music. This is a full-on sonic assault. Does sound a bit like the thing King Crimson were later to do in their Lark's Tongue and Red period. John McLaughlin was shredding before the term was even invented. Birds of Fire, Mahavishnu Orchestra.
You've been listening to a Twangling Jack album review special on the Art Show on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. This is Fella with Brenda.
This is a tale that I never wanted to tell, so I'm gonna sing it instead. Ready? Let's go! Brenda, Brenda, what's your agenda? You're 17 and your whole life's ahead of ya. Don't be fooled by his looks or his charm, it's not real. I've seen it before and I know what he's like. You don't wanna end up on Jeremy Kyle. Nobody wants to see another fatherless child. And I know that you want him to stay, but I told you so are the words that I don't wanna say when he's left your love for dead. For dead. Brenda, Brenda, don't be a victim of a bank robber and designer clubber. He'll steal your heart like the cash from a two and be off. He'll draw you in with his compulsive lies to deter the truth and obscure your eyes. He's nobody's hero, so get out while you're still alive. And I know that you want him to stay, but I told you so are the words that I don't wanna say when he's left your love for dead. For dead. Don't say I never warned ya. Don't say I never told ya. And don't say I never warned ya. Hey! Brenda, Brenda. Brenda, Brenda. Hey! Brenda, Brenda, what's your agenda? 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 Brenda, Brenda.
That was Brenda by Fella. You're listening to the Art Show on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host, Dane Cobain, and this week we are doing a Twangling Jack Ford album review special, so we're going to head back to the Oak Shed now to catch up with some more album reviews courtesy of Twangling Jack Ford.
The Mamas and Papas. California Dreaming, the best of the Mamas and Papas. The story of the Mamas and Papas is told out in the song Creek Alley. It starts, John and Mitchie were getting kinda itchy just to leave the folk music behind. John and Mitchie were John Phillips and his wife Michelle. John was tall and cool, played the guitar and wore strange hats. And Michelle was the most fragrant of all the flower children. John wrote songs which were sung with Michelle, Denny and Cass, in the brightest, purest harmonies to come out of the golden days of the mid-60s. The epitome of sunshine pop coming from the Sunshine State. Yet no one was getting fat except Mama Cass. Their appearance with their hippie garb was a shock to those who had only heard the innocuous songs. And Cass's obvious weight problem was an unkind target for cruel humour when they turned up on TV variety shows. They went from being the hippie outcasts to being the new musical establishment, being the organisers of 1967's Monterey Pop Festival, which documented the maturing of pop into rock. They were the ABBA of the 60s, both with the quality of the material and the marriage breakups, and they had all the infidelities and jealousies that Fleetwood Mac were to become famous for. They may even have gone further than Fleetwood Mac in having a song detailing how Michelle cheated on John with Denny, which was written by John and Denny. On this compilation you get the big songs, Monday Monday, California Dreaming, dedicated to the one I love, I Saw Her Again Last Night, and the aforementioned Creek Alley. Each one an absolute gem. You also get the 3 excellent Mama Cass solo singles, It's Getting Better, Dream a Little Dream of Me, and Make Your Own Kind of Music. It does suffer from a problem often found on compilations, in that usually the later stuff is not so good. And this CD has quite a lot of cover songs providing filler, but the best is the best. And this is the best of the Mamas and Papas, California Dreaming. Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, The Boatman's Call. Nick Cave is a musician and songwriter of extremes. He first became known as singer with The Birthday Party, an Australian band whose post-punk abrasive proto-goth was often played by John Peel. Blasts of ragged rhythm and jagged guitars, such as their most famous song, Release the Bats. Following the demise of The Birthday Party, Cave fronted his own band, The Bad Seeds, a much more conventional rock ensemble. He is possibly best known for the song Red Right Hand, which is used in the TV show Peaky Blinders, and for his duet with fellow Australian Kylie Minogue. The Boatman's Call may be the most intimate, simple and melodic of all his albums. It is very much a stripped-down singer-songwriter collection of songs. It opens with one of Cave's best songs, a romantic ballad called Into My Arms. It is a brilliant piece of songwriting, even if it starts with the line, I don't believe in an interventionist God, but I know, darling, that you do. But if I did, I would kneel down and ask him not to intervene when it came to you. Cave's other work can at times be rocky with harsh guitar textures and Tom Waits-like junkyard percussion, but The Boatman's Call is very much a piano-led piece. His playing is the perfect accompaniment for the song's melodies, with tasteful embellishments between the lines. There is bass and drums, a few unobtrusive guitars, backing vocals and the customary Bad Seeds violin. Though it uses few instruments, it never sounds empty. There is little of the preposterous metaphors and dark imagery that he often employs, though there are words that might shock, made to stand out by being clearly spoken as well as being sung. The album tackles the subjects of sensuality and sexuality. It is non-denominationally spiritual and very romantic. It does tail off a bit towards the end, stopping it from being perfect. It was written at the time of his affair with PJ Harvey. He sings about her as the West Country girl and the girl with the green eyes and black hair. Cave and Harvey, Nick and Polly, the goth Romeo and Juliet, or Buckingham and Nix. Les Miserables of the 90s, The Boatman's Call, Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds. I Want to See the Bright Lights Tonight, Richard and Linda Thompson. Richard Thompson wrote a folk rock classic when he was in his teens. He played guitar with Fairport Convention, who still play that song, Meet on the Ledge, to close every show, as they have done for over 50 years. He played on the Fairport albums that pioneered the combining of folk songs and jigs and reels, with electric guitars and a rock rhythm section. He is widely regarded as a great guitarist, both electric and acoustic, and he has written numerous classic songs, somehow managing to make them sound like they're from some long ago, once upon a time golden age of roving minstrels, maypoles and cider with Rosie, even if they have modern cultural references, humour and innuendo. The thing he has never had is a pop star voice. A local record shop proprietor, when serving me with a Richard Thompson solo CD, described him as a singing undertaker. He sings deep and with a folky accent that does not sound like his native North London tongue. It expresses misery and contempt excellently, but even I sound happier than Richard Thompson. However, he did make a series of quite successful albums with his wife at the time, with songs that got played on the radio and performed on TV. I Want to See the Bright Lights Tonight is one of those songs that sound like they should be sung by a music hall act, dressed down and standing in front of a bucolic backdrop. People from the past reminiscing nostalgically about their own lost golden age, backed by a brass band. The album is a Thomas Hardy novel for the ears, a cast of almost certainly doomed characters making the most of it. A beggar girl and a circus act, hoary-handed sons of toil, and girls in their best frocks looking for a husband, or maybe just to dance to a fiddle and accordion band, amongst the hay bales and stowed away Aunt Sally's and coconut shies. A simpler time when bows and lace were treasure, and a fine coat would not be complete without silver buttons. And all the time through all the different types of sepia-tinged nostalgic music, Richard Thompson plays edgy, innovative electric guitar licks that inexplicably work perfectly, and Linda Thompson could almost be Sandy Denny. I Want to See the Bright Lights Tonight. Richard and Linda Thompson. In Step, Stevie Ray Vaughan and Double Trouble. I was cleaning out a van that had been used by a woman driver who I knew quite well. She had left a number of CDs, most of which were dancey, partyish good time compilations. 80s pop and 90s dance hits like Mr. Vain and Rhythm is a Dancer, and a reggae collection. But amongst them was a Stevie Ray Vaughan album called In Step, which was the last studio album he recorded with his band Double Trouble. This was a surprise to me because in my crowd, Stevie Ray Vaughan was talked of in hushed tones as the great lost guitar hero whose illustrious career sadly ended in 1990 in a helicopter crash just as it was starting. I kept the Stevie Ray Vaughan and the reggae compilation, and when I got into playing electric guitar again I watched a couple of Stevie Ray Vaughan documentaries and I decided I had to give the CD a listen. I am not a great blues fan and certainly not a great blues player. I excuse my lack of proficiency with the line I once heard, "I could have been a great blues guitarist, but the doctor put me on Prozac." I had mistakenly thought that if he was as good as everybody said he was, his music would only appeal to aficionados. I was wrong. The album starts with a bang with a Jerry Lee Lewis type rocker, and I particularly enjoyed the piano which gets to play the first solo on the album. It then seems to cover every kind of blues-based music with a fast shuffle, a funky soul-y type number, a Hendrix Redhouse-ish slow blues, a 12-bar instrumental like a UK 60s blues boom, Chicken Shack, Fleetwood Mac, John Mayall Can't Fail blues, some Chuck Berry or not, you never can tell. Some a bit like The King, BB that is, and something a bit jazzy. The second track is a rock song that would not have been out of place on a Bruce Springsteen album, and to give the album that 80s commercial sound, it seems to me that tricks were borrowed from those big rock albums like Born in the USA, notably the big snare that accentuates the offbeat, even when the band are not playing the offbeat. For me, this dated it and spoilt it, despite the excellence of the guitar and the other musicians, and I particularly enjoyed all the keyboards on this album. So that is Stevie Ray Vaughan and Double Trouble, In Step.
Big thank you to Twangling Jack Ford for this week's album reviews. You're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host Dane Cobain, and this is Joe Martin with Dreamlight State.
I'm here like a line in the sand on dry land. Maybe I should be writing something to mean something to somebody, to me. But the words are like drip, drip, and somehow they don't wanna fit. There's a shift and the changes. I'm into different stages. Oh, I'm just
by step. And sometimes I'm not walking or talking, lying on the carpet in a dreamlike state. Lying on the carpet in a dreamlike state. I'm just sat here reflecting my life, taking step by step. But sometimes I'm not even walking or talking. Lying on the carpet in a dreamlike state. Is this my fate? To drift, to ebb and flow, to skate, and it's fall from the sky and land on me like snow, and all I can do is take it slow. All I can do is take it slow. Oh.
Colored sound, something to think about. Blue means you're feeling down. Blue's all you've been. When you've got your worries round, I can't compete. When you've got your worries round, there's no room
That was Coloured Sound by Harry Quinn, and before that we had Dreamlike State by Joe Martin. You're listening to The Art Show on 106.6 FM Wickham Sound. I'm your host, Dane Cobain. This is normally the part of the show where we head over to the Ilk Shed to get an album review from Twangling Jack Ford, but he has been doing his album review special this week, so we're going to skip that. Instead, we've got reminders. We are sometimes on Wednesday nights now, depending upon whether there's a football match on the Tuesday. You can email me here at the studio on dane.cobain@wickhamsound.org.uk. That's dane.cobain@wickhamsound.org.uk. You can find us on Facebook. If you search for The Art Show on Wickham Sound, you should be able to find us. And we're repeated on Wickham Sound on Monday nights. We're on the Wickham Sound Listen Again, iTunes, Spotify, and wherever else you get your podcasts. So that's it for this week. Big thank you to everyone whose music I've shared. Thank you to Twangling Jack Ford for this week's album reviews. Thank you to you for listening. I'll see you next week, and in the meantime, this is Radio Generation with their version of Gene Genie. Catch ya.
Snuck off to the city, strung out on lasers and flashback blazers, and ate all your razors while pulling the waiters, talking about Monroe and walking on Snow White. New York's a go-go and everything tastes nice. Oh, little greenie, ooh-hoo. Genie lives on his back. Genie loves chili stacks. He's outrageous, he screams and he balls. Genie, let yourself go. Sits like a man, but he smiles like a reptile. She loves him, but just for a short while. She's scratching the sand, won't let go of his hand. He says he's a beautician, and sells you nutrition, and keeps all your dead hair for making up underwear. Poor little greenie. Ooh-hoo. Genie lives on his back. Genie loves chili stacks. He's outrageous, he screams and he balls. Genie, let yourself go. So simple-minded, can't drive his mojo. Lights on the neon, sleeps in a capsule. Loves to be loved. Loves to be loved. Lives on his back. Genie loves chili stacks. He's outrageous, he screams and he balls. Genie, let yourself go. Genie lives on his back. Genie loves chili stacks. He's outrageous, he screams and he balls. Genie, let yourself go. You betcha.